So here we'll go to and let me start in this Home tab. So here in this workspace, I'm looking at facilities items, which you can tell with that FAC. I'm looking at service request items, and I'm looking at incident items. If we take one step back, I'm going to hit this administration tab and look at my ITSM workspace, and in here I can see all the items that potentially could be entered and then routed to this workspace. So I can see changes, facilities, HR requests could come here, incidents, problems, etc. So as a result, when I land up in this Home tab, that's what I'm seeing. I'll just do a quick refresh and make sure that we have all the items that have come in, and we can see that tablet PC was the last one that we entered. I can see as well that it's pending approval. Now, I alluded earlier that there was a graphical workflow that we can see with respect to any of the workflows in the environment. So I'm going to show that for change. So at this point, we'll just go in and approve this so we can go on to the next step. So here I'm going into Service Request 159. I can see really quickly here on the left some of the tabs that I'm exposing to my technicians that weren't necessarily exposed to my end user. My end user is just walking through a few questions. Here, though, I can see, of course, contact information. I can see the details for this service request. Again, all the answers that my end user put in. I'm going to head down to the approvals, and here I can see in my list I have 2 people that could potentially approve this request. Now, you can set this up where you require 3 of them to approve it. If one rejects it, then this is rejected. It could be that you do the unanimous. So you have some, again, with respect to how you want to do those approvals, you have some granularity on how you can set that up. Here I'm just going to say approve. And then, of course, my status here is going to change, and then it goes on to the next step. Going here at the top. So that's that service request. I'm just going to close this one, and we can look at a few of the other items that were in here. So I had the service request. I had the incident for the application. So the end user was experiencing an issue with WinSCP. So here when I go into incident 10277, it's going to look very similar to my service request form. So you can make them very similar, or they can be very different. Again, you'll have the ability with that drag and drop to decide what it needs to look like. But with Service Core, and I mentioned this in the deck, we talk about converging IT with my device management or my systems management. So what I'm going to do here is really quickly tie an asset to this incident that's come in. And what you can do, I mean, you may have a user as part of your new hire process. You're assigning them a laptop, maybe a mobile device, could be a printer if they're a remote user, but you can basically associate all those assets with a particular user. So what I'm going to do here is quickly just add an asset. And then what we'll see are some of the convergence, and we'll just choose the one here. So again, a list of assets available to this end user. I'm just going to select one, and we'll do a quick save. Now what I have the ability to do, end users calling me and telling me they're having an issue with that application, I'm going to select the asset and pull down my actions and look quickly at the details of this system. So this is where we're converging with the BMC client management tool. It does that exhaustive inventory for me, so it can tell me all the software that's on this asset. So as I look through here, I'm going to head over to the last page, because I know it starts with a W, maybe back up one from there. And what I can see quickly is that they're running version 5.1.5. So we know in our environment we have an issue with that particular version, so I'm going to simply upgrade them. Now, I can do that one of several ways. More than likely, though, with my technician already in the service desk ticket, I can just launch it from here. So here I would go into my advanced actions and then choose the payload, which is basically deploying that later version of WinSCP. So again, this is kind of some of that convergence we talk about, converging IT with the service desk. So here I'm going to my software packages, and I'm just choosing the one that it needs to deploy. So the backside of that, if you will, is in client management. I would have built up the payload that allows me to do the distribution of that particular piece of software. We'll just close this for now. I'm going to head back to my view that's showing all the incidents that have come in. I'll just close this one for now. And then we're back at our main console. So from a technician view, you'll notice here I've given them just an actions button. And from this actions button, they can go in and create a new issue. It could be a new change request, a facilities request, HR, and so forth. Any of these, though, are actions that I can also put onto that end-user form. I can also, right here where we have actions, line them up in this particular tab. I'm going to do a new one just so you can see what that interface looks like from a technician perspective, and we'll do a change request. So when I say new change request, as you can expect, I may have different templates that are in play for my changes versus my facilities versus just my normal incidents. So when I pull the list down here, again, I've got the 4, and I'll just choose the one that's going to upgrade when SCP. And you can see there it's put in my description. You'll notice the change type. I can see the status automatically went to pending approval. I can see impact, urgency, and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then what we'll do is look into that visual workflow so we can see what needs to happen with those standard changes that come into the environment. So what I'm going to do here is back up to this administration tab. And under this record definitions, we're going to look at this change request. And the nice thing here is for each of these items, you will have forms that you can create, fields, set up the dependencies. You'll have business rules, workflow processes, etc. The quick template, so that's what we were just looking at to create this change for upgrading that application. So what I'm going to go into is the workflow processes, and let's have a look at the standard change request. So again, a nice graphical view. And what it's showing me on the left are several things. So what's the defining criteria for me to enter into this workflow? So here I'll just do a quick edit, and it's really simple. So in the field, so here's where you get to basically choose anything on that field to throw you into a particular workflow. And this one says if that change type is equal to standard, then we're into this particular workflow. I'm going to go back to the graphic, and I can see here I've got this pending approval. And over here on the left, I got the various approval states. So if we approve, then really the next state that we should be seeing is into accepted. But over here on the left, you'll see a few things. I can see I have 3 potential approvers for this request. If I opt to add, so I can add additional ones, I can remove ones that are there. Here from my pick list, if you will, I can choose an individual. I can choose a team. I could also make this a dynamic. So this dynamic may come into play when you're thinking about service request and maybe one of your employees is requesting that tablet. I want their manager to approve or disapprove that. All right, so here I'll just hit cancel. That's my into the approvals area. And if we just scoot down a little bit, you'll have the business rules. So you'll remember when I was one screen back, it said fields, forms, business rules, workflow processes. So this workflow process can include, and this one obviously does include, some of my business rules. So by way of an example, if we look at this pending approval rule, I'll just hit edit. And it'll have the business rule properties set up. But again, the business rule is very granular as well. I'll step back so we can see all the ones that you'll get out of the box, but then again, you'll have the ability to create your own. But on this one, my voting is the trigger, and my criteria is when the number of approval votes is greater than 1. So I didn't need it to be unanimous in this occasion. I just needed one person to approve it. And then at that point, we're moving to the next state. All right, so here we'll back up into this workflow. If I wanted to add a business rule, at this point. So you can see there after save, maybe I want to do email notification rules, service level management, all available to me as well from this particular view. There, let's say we're going to approve it, so we're going to go to the next step. If we reject, then we can see it would basically give me one status of closed. So I'm going to go in and approve it, and then we can see those next steps that are in front of us. So here, let's go back to the Home tab. For this particular change request, I'm going to go down to the approvals. And before I do that, let me show one other thing here. So here in the status, you can see there I've got the 3. And you remember from that workflow, I basically had the 3 areas that I can go into. This one is, again, at my pending approval. So I'm going to head down to approvals and go ahead and approve this. Now when we head back up, we can see that my status changed to accepted, and really the only next thing I can do is schedule this change. So now it's following through that workflow that we saw on the previous graph. Okay, so again, with any of my items, I'll head back to this administration tab so we can see this. With any of these items in this particular workspace, I'm going to be able to set up different workflows and really trigger on anything on that field. So you can get very granular with respect to when you want to go into a certain approval process or what flow you want to occur for any of the items that you have. Okay, so here let's go back to ITSM, and I'm not going to save any of those changes. And let's look at a couple of things here. So in my incident, we'll look at this one as an example. So for my incident item, on the left, you'll notice my forms, my fields, my business rules, workflow processes, etc. I'm going to look at a particular form, this agent web form. As this is coming up, what you'll notice on the left are basically those things that I can drag and drop onto this form. So I can see, as an example, I've got my contact information. Here I've got my properties for that section, but I'm going to open up the form controls. And let's say I wanted to add a drop-down pick list, again, for my technicians to this form. It's just a simple drag, so I'm going to get this drop-down, and I'm going to add it to my form. And you'll notice here on the left, we've got the field label, so I could say something like new data here, and it's changing it on the spot. For that pick list, this field bound to. So here I can choose any of the fields that I've already built up, or I can create a new one and then put in new values. So from that standpoint, it's very easy to customize the form that you're going to present to your end users. And this one is actually to my technicians. Okay, so here I'll just take that off. We don't necessarily need that. Are you sure you want to remove? We'll say yes. Those are my form controls, and then I had the fields. Now, the other thing that we had the ability to manipulate was that that console that we were showing to our end users. So if I just do one tab over, I have this open. It's the minimalist console. And you'll recall that I had the 4 buttons here at the top for them. Now, those are what we call actions. So what I'm going to do is on the left, just expose that actions heading. And what I can do very quickly is if I wanted to present them with a URL, it's a simple drag and drop. Once it's here, then I'm just going out to the URL. Similarly, if it was one of my items, if it was one of the, I'm going to take this off really quickly. We'll just remove that. And if it was one of my items, we'll add this so you can see. You'll recall that we had many items in that ITSM workspace. So here, what I'm able to do now is call out any one of those items. So that's how I can make it available on the form, and then again, depending upon that specific customer, tailor their end user experience. All right, one of the other things, and again, we'll just remove this one. that I alluded to were the widgets. Those were appearing at the bottom of one of the screen, but you can say if you want the widgets on the right, on the left, on the lower. But here you can expose charts, RSS feeds, some of the reports that you've built with the service analytics. That can all be a part of the widget that you're making apparent on that console.